or Social Security, even though we literally have years' worth of statements and speeches showing that many of them believe just the opposite. But another critical question remains unanswered and must be addressed. Are Republicans also going to target Medicaid? Medicaid is one of the most important programs in the country. 1 in 4 Americans rely on Medicaid to cover their health care needs. Let me say that again. 1 in 4 Americans rely on Medicaid to cover health care needs. It's not just low-income Americans that...
You can see as we are now approaching here as President Biden stepping up to the podium here to talk about those objects being shot down. Let's listen in here live on Unfiltered on Live Now from Fox.
NORAD closely scrutinized our airspace, including enhancing our radar to pick up more slow-moving objects above our country, around the world. In doing so, they tracked 3 unidentified objects, one in Alaska, Canada, and over Lake Huron in the Midwest. They acted in accordance with established parameters for determining how to deal with unidentified aerial objects in U.S. airspace. At their recommendation, I gave the order to take down these 3 objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities. We acted in consultation with the Canadian government. I spoke personally with Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada on Saturday. And just as critically, we acted out of an abundance of caution and an opportunity that allowed us to take down these objects safely. Our military and the Canadian military are seeking to recover the debris so we can learn more about these 3 objects. Our intelligence community is still assessing all 3 incidences. They're reporting to me daily and will continue their urgent efforts to do so, and I will communicate that to the Congress. We don't yet know exactly what these 3 objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these 3 objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research. When I came into office, I instructed our intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of unidentified aerial objects. We know that a range of entities, including countries, companies, and research organizations, operate objects at altitudes for purposes that are not nefarious, including legitimate scientific research. I want to be clear. We don't have any evidence that there has been a sudden increase in the number of objects in the sky. We're now just seeing more of them, partially because the steps we've taken to increase our radars, to narrow our radars. And we have to keep adapting our approach to dealing with these challenges. That's why I've directed my team to come back to me with sharper rules for how we will deal with these unidentified objects moving forward, distinguishing between those that are likely to pose safety and security risks that necessitate action and those that do not. But make no mistake, if any object presents a threat to the safety and security of the American people, I will take it down. I'll be sharing with Congress these classified policy parameters when they're completed, and they'll remain classified so we don't give our roadmap to our enemies to try to evade our defenses. Going forward, these parameters will guide what actions we'll take while responding to unmanned and unidentified aerial objects. We're going to keep adapting them as the challenges evolve, if it evolves. In addition, I've directed my National Security Advisor to lead a government-wide effort to make sure we are positioned to deal safely and effectively with the objects in our airspace. First, we will establish a better inventory of unmanned airborne objects in space above the United States airspace and make sure that inventory is accessible and up to date. Second, we'll implement further measures to improve our capacity to detect unmanned objects in our airspace. Third, we'll update the rules and regulations for launching and maintaining unmanned objects in the skies above the United States of America. And fourth, my Secretary of State will lead an effort to help establish a global common global norms in this largely unregulated space. These steps will lead to safer and more secure skies for our air travelers, our military, our scientists, and for people on the ground as well. That's my job as your President, Commander-in-Chief. As the events of the previous days have shown, we'll always act to protect the interest of the American people and the security of the American people. Since I came to office, we've developed the ability to identify, track, and study high-altitude surveillance balloons connected with the Chinese military. When one of these high-altitude surveillance balloons entered our airspace over the continental United States earlier in the month, I gave the order to shoot it down as soon as it would be safe to do so. The military advised against shooting it down over land because of the sheer size of it. It was the size of multiple school buses and posed a risk to people on the ground if it was shot down where people lived. Instead, we tracked it closely, we analyzed its capabilities, and we learned more about how it operates. And because we knew its path, we were able to protect sensitive sites against collection. We waited until it was safely over water, which would not only protect civilians, but also enable us to recover substantial components for further analytics. And then we shot it down, sending a clear message. The violation of our sovereignty is unacceptable. We'll act to protect our country, and we did. Now, this past Friday, we put restrictions on 6 firms that directly support the People's Republic Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army aerospace program that includes airships and balloons, denying them access to U.S. technology. We briefed our diplomatic partners and our allies around the world, and we know about China's program and where their balloons have flown. Some of them have also raised their concerns directly with China. Our exports have lifted components of the Chinese balloon's payload off the ocean floor. We're analyzing them as I speak, and what we learn will strengthen our capabilities. Now, we'll also continue to engage with China, as we have throughout the past 2 weeks. As I've said since the beginning of my administration, we seek competition, not conflict with China. We're not looking for a new Cold War, but I make no apologies, and we will compete. And we'll responsibly manage that competition so that it doesn't veer into conflict. This episode underscores the importance of maintaining open lines of communication between our diplomats and our military professionals. Our diplomats will be engaging further, and I will remain in communication with President Xi. I'm grateful for the work of the last several weeks of our intelligence, diplomatic, and military professionals who have proved once again to be the most capable in the world. And I want to thank you all. Now look, the other thing I want to point out is that we are going to keep our allies and the Congress contemporaneously informed of all we know and all we learn. And I expect to be speaking with President Xi, and I hope we are going to get to the bottom of this. But I make no apologies for taking down that balloon. Thank you very much.
Sir, the question was it? There's been criticism. There's been criticism that this wasn't. There's been criticism that this.
You're trying to compromise by your family's business relations.
Sir, Mr. President, there has been criticism.
Did you overreact?
Mr. President, there has been criticism that this was an overreaction that was done because of political pressure.
You can come to my office and ask the question when you have more polite people.
Mr. President, why have you chosen Poland for your trip to mark anniversary of the war? And what's your message? What?
When are you speaking to President Xi, Mr. President?
You were just listening in there, President Biden overheard with some questions there, but you could hear him not answer any at the end. Obviously, a lot of questions being asked. But this was in relation to all these flying objects getting shot down. We want to give you a little bit of a recap of what President Biden just said here on Live Now from Fox. Of course, he was breaking that silence as he spoke for really the first time about those new objects that were shot down, including that Chinese spy balloon on February the 4th. Of course, he did say that the final 3 on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were likely not tied to China. They were potentially some private entity or a research object that they're in the air. They also said they're going to establish new parameters, new protocols around those high aerial objects and what to do moving forward. So certainly learning a lot, but they also said they don't really know what those 3 other objects were, as they're still detailing and gathering debris and details about them. So as you heard President Biden speak here on Live Now from Fox about this and those 4 objects being shot down, I do want to put up this tweet just to give us a little bit more of a recap from Jackie Heinrich, who was likely in the room there as she was also covering the White House. And she says, POTUS says the objects shot down since Friday were likely commercial or research use. New policies for dealing with future potential threats will be shared with Congress, but not with the public, so adversaries can't use those to evade. That's what he said during this short press conference here on Live Now from Fox. So we're following this very, very closely. We'll have much more reaction coming up in just a little bit later on tonight. I'm Andy Mack. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break.